introduction. And I think we'll just run around the teams. Pastor May, Leon May, one of the
Good evening. I'm Thea Agnew Benben, one of the co-chairs.
All right. This is Asher Harley, representing Congregation Beth Shalom.
Celeste Grouden with the Alaska Black Caucus.
This is Tanya Iden with Agnewbeck Consulting, and I'm doing a presentation later on in the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Tanya. And I don't know if I can see that online. I think I see. Felix first.
Hey everyone, Felix Rivera, Anchorage Assembly.
Hannah. Hannah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, welcomes. We're doing our welcomes.
Oh, hello. I
Yes.
have a new title now, and I am Dr. Panna Lynch Jerusi, community member.
All right. Well, yeah, well. All right. Looks to be Joan.
Joan Ryan in Alaska.
What was that?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, everyone. This is Joan Ryan with Enlaces on the state of Alaska.
Righty. Heather.
Hi, this is Heather Ireland with Anchorage School-Based Health Centers.
Righty. So I think that makes the rounds for now, and we'll move forward, I think, with our land acknowledgement. Anybody want to volunteer for that?
I can do it.
Okay, doke.
Should we do one more introduction before that?
Okay, all right, Miss Lori, you can do your introduction.
Hi, Lori Pickett with Alaska Literacy Program.
Oh. Taffy?
Taffy Toledo with Pacific Community of Alaska.
Righty, good evening to all. Who is that? Is that Issa? Issa?
Hello,
Are
it's
you-
Issa.
Go ahead.
Hi, Issa Spatrosano, State Refugee Coordinator. Hi, everyone.
All righty, thank you. And so I think for now, that's all of us. And we'll move forward with the land acknowledgement.
Okay. This time of year, I think about the light coming back. I think that's a topic that hits us all this time of year. And it's also a time where a lot of our faith traditions celebrate that. Easter to me is a celebration of from darkness to light. Passover has that same element. And so I want to be grateful to the people who've stewarded this land for many hundreds of years, the Dena'ina people, and to the many people who helped build this community, including members of the Black community, Pacific Islanders, people from the Philippines who've been in Alaska since the 1700s or earlier, all sorts of immigrants from around the world. My own parents came here, Tanya's parents came here from other countries. And I also want to acknowledge the foundation of our country that we're a part of. The prosperity and the wealth of our country is really beholden to the stolen labor and lives of people from African descent, as well as stolen lands and cultures and languages of people who were here when others settled. And I see our work today as a way of creating a new community that really repairs that damage and acknowledges and is grateful for, and is figuring out how do we all live together as we go forward and make it a safe and fulfilling place for all of us to live.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Thea, for that timely, magnanimous, and heartfelt land acknowledgement. Thank you so much. All righty. And we'll move right along to unfinished business. And we've tabled for a later date the change lab legal analysis. And so next up is discussion of the language access audit with assembly members. And Felix is the only one that we have with us at the moment as far as assembly is concerned. And so whatever questions, commentary you might have relative to the language access audit, maybe there's somebody with a question for you, Felix. And if not, we'd just like some info relative to that. Anybody have any question for Felix relative to that? And just before you come, let me also acknowledge the presence of Attorney Hurt. You might want to say whatever. Yeah.
Hi, Matthew Hurt, Legislative Counsel.
All righty. Thank you.
So yes, thank you, Celeste. I'm wondering what the status is of that, Felix. Can you fill us in? Has it been presented to the assembly? Because I thought I heard some conversation about it during an assembly meeting, but if you could just give us an update.
Yeah, thanks. So there was conversation about this at an assembly meeting, and the recommendation that was made was for Junior, our chief equity officer, to make a presentation at this committee. And so I made all of the necessary introductions for Junior to make the presentation at this committee. He committed to doing so. I'm not exactly sure where the coordination is on that, if it's scheduled for a future meeting or what's going on with that.
Felix, this is Thea. So Junior did include Pastor May and I on an email saying he was available for that. So I think we would probably like to know from the committee when would you want that to happen before responding. So he's available.
I would like for it to take place as soon as we can get it calendared. That's just me.
Okay. So would it be
Me
feasible?
too.
Okay, good. Would it be feasible to follow up with it with our next meeting, keep it under unfinished business, and see if we can get him in at that time? We good with that? You good with that, Celeste? Lori, you good with that?
Can I ask Felix a question?
Sure.
So Felix, do you have any insight? I did not, that was not one of the assembly meetings that I watched where there was discussion, and I am curious if you could give us any more. Is there a feeling? Was there a surprise? Is there a call to action?
Yeah, thanks. So the conversation that we had at the assembly level was fairly brief. There was a concern raised about some of the findings in the audit, and the discussion pivoted to, normally when we have concerns about findings in an audit, we send it over to some committee. Usually it's the municipal audit committee, but there are recommendations to send it over to the equity committee this time around. So that was pretty much the length of the discussion. So some concerns raised, but and some interest in exploring the findings and seeing what our plan of action is.
Righty, Joan.
Oh, I think Isa was first.
Okay, Issa.
Thanks.
I'm glad you could see it because I could.
Yeah, that's hard when we're online. Felix, just a question for you from your viewpoint, and then just making sure we use our time well with Junior. When you read that audit, what parts do you think are a part that it's the administration's role to play, or is there a part that you saw in there that was a role to play for the assembly? Just in your precursory kind of review of it. I just want to make sure we use our time well with Junior and don't throw questions to them that are really assembly questions and vice versa.
Thanks. So in my opinion, the audit had a variety of findings, all of which were truly administrative in nature. There may be some budgetary request that goes with implementing the administrative findings, in which case that would be a mixture of the assembly and the administration finding solutions for that. But I think primarily, at least for now, until we know if there are truly budgetary needs, that it's a purely administrative function to do the initial exploration and answer the questions. But in the end, it might end up being something the assembly has to consider during our budget.
Okay, thank you. Was that good? You good? Joan?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with my email that I sent to you, and I included Felix, and it's regarding to the liaison that they talked about in the audit, because it sounds to me that that already happened. So if so, who is this person? And if not, what's going on with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think your question is regarding who the audit named a specific point person in there for language access compliance, and that is something that we're gonna have to wait until Junior presents at whatever meeting for him to discuss.
Yeah, I think Ms. Felix, she was referring to the document stating that there was a liaison, named liaison, and she was just wondering if anybody knows who that is at this point.
Thanks. And my response to that is no. We're gonna have to wait for Junior to tell us who that person is.
Okay, Celeste.
Yeah, I thought Junior mentioned that they had just hired somebody for that role, Felix. And anyway, it just seemed like, from what I witnessed during the exchange, it was embarrassing, because it seemed like the responses that were given were just more of the BS.
Okay. One question I have, Mr. Felix, and that is this: do you know how and possibly why the language access department falls under the auspices of the chief equity officer?
Yeah, thanks. So that's just a decision that this administration made when they were organizing functions in the executive to put language access under the EOO official, and the EOO official is under Junior. So in the end, he is the one that's ultimately responsible.
Okay. So ultimately, I see your hand. Ultimately, then we're waiting to, I guess, talk to Junior to find out anything about this audit access department. Lori.
Thank you. Felix, since the Assembly sees value in having this information brought to this particular committee to do work on it, does the Assembly also see value in resourcing this committee?
Thanks. So I can only speak for myself and not as the full Assembly. So certainly if there are requests that this committee wants to make in terms of resources, the budget that's coming up next month is the opportune time to do that. And I think I've talked to this group in the past about how to go about that. And just like any other budgetary requests, providing the necessary justifications and what you want to do with them, all those kinds of things. I'd be happy to guide this committee through that if that's something that you all want to do.
Right. And I guess my follow-up to that would be, were you specifically talking about financial resources or, yeah, personnel, right?
It can be hard to participate in the meeting if you're the note taker, and so
Right.
we choose to, rotate that
Right.
and other pieces as well.
Good. That's why.
Training.
Yeah, that's why I followed up on that. So it wouldn't be thought just budgeting. Okay. All right, any other question relative to that for Felix?
I do. So with the assembly recommending for this to come to the equity committee, what is the expectation that the assembly has that this committee, I mean, we want Junior to come and have, like, we're going to question him on those things, but would the assembly want us to, should we write a report back on, after questioning and like send recommendations? What is the expectation here?
Thanks. So I think overall the expectation is likely similar to any other audit that we receive, which is for just using the normal process as an example. When we get an audit that has a variety of findings, the municipal audit committee will meet. They will go through those findings with internal audit, with members of the committee and the department. And we will try to get a good sense of how the department is managing the findings. And generally speaking, management tends to want to rectify issues. The question is always how they rectify them, to what degree they rectify them, and how efficient all of that is. So we generally sort of dive into those details, and then we may or may not follow up, depending on how serious the findings are. In future audit committee meetings, we may request a future follow-up audit. But once it gets to the municipal audit committee, there isn't like a report back to the full assembly. It's handed off, and there generally speaking isn't another follow-up unless we request a audit to do that.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Mr. Felix, in deference to Taffy's question, I think the inference was what benefit and what part does this equity committee play in the findings? And so I guess in my response to that question for you, Taffy, would be that we'd love to have the findings. We want the findings, and ours is to peruse those, and if we find any inequities, then we have an opportunity to address those. And I think that would be our part in it. What do you think, Thea?
It sounds like the first step is to get Junior to come and present both the findings and then whatever they might already be trying to do to address them. And then it seems like this committee could request him to come back numerous times, perhaps, to kind of continue to follow up and make sure those remedies were adequate. Felix, is that within our purview?
I would argue yes.
And basically that's what I was stating. If there are any inequities, we could follow up on that to make sure that they get taken care of. And I hope that answers that for you, Taffy.
It did. Thank you very much.
All righty.
So I just have
Yes.
a quick question. So I'm just reflecting back on that assembly meeting. And it's great that we do all of this work and we bring Junior back here and we ask him questions. And if we have to, again, we bring him back. But at some point, that information needs to go to the assembly so that they can make some movement with it, because we can't. There's nothing we can do, but the assembly can. So I'm hopeful get all this work done, that they will actually use it in a way to bring about some change.
And I would also think in addition to that, we could also, as we've done in the past, we could also get the chief auditor back in and address whatever concerns we had. And maybe that person in that department could address it internally. And then whatever requires assembly stamp off and approval or whatever would follow that. And that's just kind of my thought process on it. All right.
I'm sorry, I have another question. It's Felix, when we're audited as a nonprofit, and I've just been through our first single audit, which was a real treat. And if we get findings, which we did not, So yes, thank you very much for everybody being appreciative of that. There are consequences. There are consequences to findings in an audit. What are the consequences to finding in these kinds of audits?
Yeah, thanks, Lori. So these audits are not your sort of general accounting audits that you're referring to. These are audits that are done by our internal audit department. And generally speaking, there may be consequences that arise from an audit, like personnel changes, um, but it's not necessarily something that internal audit or is it would sort of lead that charge. It's really the administration's job to figure out, once an audit is completed and they have the findings, how they're going to respond to those and what consequences that there may be. So as an example, like there's one audit that's done every year by internal audit around P cards, which is basically our credit cards that we have. And the consequences there is, if during the internal audit process you're found to having misused your P card, then you don't get to have a P card anymore. Those kinds of things. So it's all really dependent on the situation and the steps the administration wants to take.
Okay, so in follow-up to that, in view of possibly finding inequities in those reports or department processes or whatever have you, if we don't get any thing accomplished through the heads of the audit department, then the next step would be to approach the administration, correct?
So generally speaking, the internal audit department, once the audit is completed, that is their role. They don't really have too much of a role after that, only maybe to explain the audit itself, right? But then after that, the responsibility switches over to the administration, and then in the case of the municipal audit committee, the administration with the assembly providing sort of oversight to see what the heck is going on with whatever findings may come out of the audit. So generally speaking, you all shouldn't really be working too much more with internal audit on this unless you request a follow-up audit.
Okay, good. That's clarity for me. Could we interface at some point with the since this is about language access with that specific department?
Yeah, and that's why you would have Junior coming and doing a presentation, and I would say that you should ask Junior to bring his requisite staff to the presentation, so it's not just Junior himself all alone on this. That way, you could hopefully get a more thorough conversation.
Yes, and if we wanted to address anything as far as inequities, then the person on behalf of the administration, then the person we would have to start with would be Junior, correct?
That would be my suggestion, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Felix. Any further commentary, question? All right. Thank you so much for your expertise and professionalism in responding, Mr. Felix. All righty, we'll move to next and annual priorities regarding the Anchorage Health Department proposed approach, and to update that. And we did have a session the other day, and we did have some findings, some commentary or what have you, notes from that, goals, if we entitle them that, the goals for equity committee engagement with the Anchorage Health Department. And as we all found out, those of us that were part of that found out that the Anchorage Health Department is pretty vast in its scope, and there's a lot of overlapping in the divisions and departments, and just for my money, there are a lot of things in there under the Anchorage Health Department that probably need to be pulled out and have another department of division or whatever, because some of those things don't really seem to run together as it relates to health per se, and maybe they do. But there was some discussion and questions and statements made regarding that, and so ours today, I'm thinking, and maybe my esteemed co-host could help therein, but I'm thinking today ours is to target some specific approach to dealing with the Anchorage Health Department in that regard, whether it's fact finding, whether it's bringing to them concerns, whether it's just confronting ways to make it move more effectively. And so you might want to speak to that. So.
Thanks, Pastor May. So we had a really good discussion. If you flip to the last page of the document that Jasmine shared with everybody, those are notes really just of our brainstorm. So we started off with the question of what are our goals for working with the health department. So lots of things on there. And then the rest of the document is I basically just use their website to try and understand all the things that are within the different departments, or sorry, divisions within the health department, which is a lot of things. And then I made some notes in that column that says opportunities for health equity. And then we added some notes as we went through this, the group that met on Tuesday. So I think we have maybe we could have a sort of short discussion and decision of what our next steps would be. I think there's kind of two options. One, the small group could come back together again and try to get a little bit more clear about what our goals are. Or we could just start meeting with the health department because I don't think we've even introduced to them that we want to work on this. So we could just go ahead and start having a conversation with them using our initial brainstorm as kind of our place to start and then kind of formulate from there. So curious what the committee wants the next step to be.
This is Heather. I was a little overwhelmed when I first looked at the document that Thea pulled together, but then in the discussion that we had the other day, it was, I think, a good approach of like, what's the purpose of why we're looking at this? And I think, yeah, sitting down with them sooner rather than later would be a good next step.
And I was about to say, I agree with that as well. And sitting down with them and interfacing with them, and at least they would have a working idea that we're interested in interfacing with them to look at some things and what have you. And so doing some fact finding would be good. And then we wouldn't be coming off ice cold with them when we begin to address various issues. And one other thought that I have on this is that during the discussion, and every time we have this discussion about the AHD, there are always concerns that committee members bring up. And so we might want to pinpoint what some of those major concerns are, those areas, and maybe make those points and inroads into some fact finding and seeing where we can help make what work. Just a thought on it. Yes, Lori.
I also really appreciated what Joan said in our meeting about really having a thoughtful conversation with the health department about what they recognize they might need support in, what do they see that they need help in, and really hearing from them in a way that is, how can we work with them to help support them to make the improvements. I'm sure that they're aware of some of them that they would like to work on, and maybe this could be a really positive way.
Is that Pam?
It's Pam.
Panna?
Yes, sir. Who within the health department would we be interfacing with?
Anna, this is Thea. I think we'd start with the director. So we'd start with Kim Rash, and then if she wants to, delegate to somebody else or include other folks, we could go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Has Kim accepted director or is she still acting director?
That's a question.
She's
She's
technically.
acting.
Okay. All righty, thanks. All right, so we have that as a focal point for a start, and is everybody in agreement with that consensually? Are there any objections, online persons? All right, hearing none. Were you about to say something, Lord?
No, just checking.
Okay, yeah, all righty. Then we're good with that. And so that's a go, Miss Thea. We'll start there. And how soon do we want to schedule that? Would be the next question. What do you guys say?
I can just start trying to schedule it and
See where it goes? Okay, okay. And that works. And her and probably anybody she wants to bring with her or whatever. Yeah. All righty, then we'll start there.
Pastor May.
Yes.
That could all change soon. The whole makeup. I mean, not that I'm celebrating.
Do what now?
It's the same because of the election. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Got you. Okay. I wasn't there yet. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All righty.
If
All
I
right.
may add,
Yes.
Dr. May.
Yes, Taffy.
I was thinking so maybe looking into the future, would we also want to request maybe folks that have worked on it from in the past, on the alcohol tax specifically, those who created the RFP, all of those things, so we can maybe think ahead.
Yeah.
When we send out the invitation.
Did you catch that? I didn't get that.
I'm not totally catching your drift, Taffy. Can you share again?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was thinking is maybe I was thinking maybe when we contact Kim, when we ask Kim for to be a part of the conversation, right? Maybe we also ask for folks who might folks who might have history working on the alcohol tax in the health department.
Okay, you said folks who might have history working on what?
On this tax, what is it called? Alcohol tax in the health department.
Okay. I think that would be something distinct and separate in my mind, and different from interfacing with the health department heads in the beginning to get an idea of what they're all about and where we can start with them. I think that's a little different from that. The alcohol tax thing plays into some of their divisions and our departments and some funding and all of that, but that would come up the road in my mind.
Okay, thanks.
All righty. Okay, any other commentary or questions? All right, seeing and hearing none, then we'll move on to our new business phase. Did you have anything else to add before we move? Okay, thank you, Thea. All right, and by the way, Thea submitted to do the minutes for us today because we hadn't had anybody picked on it, and then the last minute I say, oh, we forgot to get a minute taker. She says, I got it, and so thank you so much. Oh. New business, any new member nominations? Right, then not hearing any or seeing any hands, then we'll go to community or data presentation and discussion. And today we have scheduled presentation and discussion regarding the strategic plan to guide alcohol tax revenue with Tanya. And your last name is Iden? Okay, I got it right. All right, Josh is not present, and Thea is here from Agnew-Beck. Okay. Oh, Tanya's the
Yeah,
one.
I'll do it. I'll do
Okay.
it. I mean, Thea could do it, but I'll do it.
Okay. Okay, Tanya.
Uh,
Tanya's our huckleberry.
Right.
All right.
Huckleberry. Awesome. You guys can hear me okay? The microphone's a little bit strange. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about a effort that is taking place right now that involves Anchorage Assembly members and city staff and community members to develop a strategic plan to help guide the alcohol tax revenue so that it can have the maximum impact in our community. You can go to the next slide. And I'm sure because you are all very engaged citizens, you're very well aware that we have an alcohol tax, but just to run down the basics of it, we voted on that in 2020. It went into effect in 2021. It's a 5% tax that consumers pay at the point of sale. So that's at the liquor store, at the bar, wherever you buy alcohol. And it raises about $15 million a year. And so we've been collecting it since 2021. So 14 to $15 million a year, essentially. And we've also been distributing it as well. You can go to the next slide. And when we approved it as voters, I mean, a big reason why I think voters approved it is because it was designed to go to issues that have an interplay with substance misuse. But specifically, it says in code that we have to spend it. I mean, those are actually on that slide are the words from the code, but we've kind of called it these three buckets. And one of them is a public safety bucket. One is kind of a child abuse, sexual assault, and domestic violence prevention bucket. And then the other is funding for substance misuse treatment, addiction recovery, mental health, behavioral health programs, and homelessness. So that's a very big bucket. And that's where, in code, it says we have to spend the money on that. And you might be thinking, okay, well, we know what we need to spend the money on. So why do we need a strategic plan? But it's been, well, I mean, Felix is here too. He could probably talk more in detail about it's pretty challenging to just make sure that you're spending those funds kind of across those three areas in an equitable way. Or, do you want to focus on one area one year and another area another year? I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could kind of slice and dice the $15 million. So the assembly really took a step back and said, we just need to kind of think more strategically about how we actually are going to give out these funds and really the impact we're trying to make. So there's kind of two ways to look at it, both the impact we're trying to make, but also kind of the process that we're going to go through and how we're going to do it. Next slide.
Could we ask questions?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind if you want to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my question would be, are there any appropriations for each one of those buckets amount wise out of the distribution?
Well, no, I mean, there hasn't necessarily been like, we are always spending 30% on this bucket and 30% on this bucket and 30%. However, the plan is kind of trying to think about that a little bit, but it's a hard needle to thread because you also don't want to bind, the assembly too much. I mean, what if one year there's like some amazing project that's getting off the ground and it needs like some sort of $5 to $10 million boost, and we have, you can only spend 30% of the funds on a certain thing. So anyways, these are the kinds of things that this plan is trying to give some guardrails to is how do you do that? Anyways, this slide here is just kind of making the link to the impact that the tobacco tax is intended to have, and really that I think why we really went for this as a community is folks were thinking like we have a whole suite of issues that we're seeing in our community, like the real-time everyday experience of, say, homelessness and substance misuse. But we need funding so that we can go upstream and we can kind of get at the root of these problems, and that we're not just keep putting the Band-Aid on it, you know, and kind of moving people around to shelters and what have you, but like really getting at the heart of like, why does somebody end up in a situation like that? And what can we do today? And how can we spend money today to ensure that this doesn't continue to be a problem in the future? So the plan itself is really framed around kind of looking at those community conditions that we could maybe impact today so that we don't see the issues that we are already seeing right now into the future. So there's a real prevention focus to the way that we're designing this plan. And that's, again, it's the assembly members that are helping with this and city staff and community members. Actually, Celeste and Toffee are participating in the steering committee to help guide this. The next slide. Oh, and just a little list of some things that we have already spent the alcohol tax on. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but we've given early education grants. There's been evidence-based grants to prevention programs. There's an early literacy specialist at the library that's funded, direct grants to some of the violence prevention organizations like Awake, STAR, Victims for Justice. There's been funding for a community resource coordinator at the library. There's been funding that's been given to shelter and housing and navigation and outreach services. There's been funding that's helped support health department staff and mental health first responders, additional APD staff, police department trainings, recruitments. Anyways, there's a long list of things that we've already been spending the funds on. And another kind of tricky thing about the way the wording is written in the code is that it totally makes sense why it's put in there, but it talks about how these funds can't be used to supplant funds that we're already using for something. So like, we're not just going to start, you know, using the alcohol tax to pay for what we should already be paying for in our police force or something like that. So, but that also gets kind of tough when you're interpreting how to spend the funds, because what if there's something really awesome that we're doing and we actually want to give more money to it? Are people thinking, we're already paying for that. We can't also now pay for it with the alcohol tax or, so anyways, there's just kind of some interesting things to think through in terms of the funding piece. Next slide. And then you may have seen these images in the community, but there is a kind of marketing campaign for the alcohol tax. And it's really kind of to honor and thank the industry, the alcohol industry, really to say, hey, thanks for making this possible in a way. I mean, so a lot of the imagery or the materials are actually out in points of sale places like coasters at the bars and things like that, and tabletop little flyers, but also just to say, hey, not necessarily the industry, but also to all of us, like, thanks Anchorage for taxing yourself and deciding to spend money on these important services and programs and opportunities for prevention. So the next slide is just a little bit more now about kind of the strategic plan. So that's a little bit where we are, but where we're going is the kind of goal for this plan is to be a guiding document for each year's alcohol tax allocations, to ensure community input, transparency, and an efficient use of the funds, and to kind of help current and future policymakers to really achieve those broad goals that we stated in code of, you know, kind of preventing the issues that were identified that the voters really wanted to fund. And so next slide. So like I mentioned, we've been working with the steering committee. 3 assembly members are on it. So Anna Brawley, Karen Bronga, and Daniel Voland are the 3 assembly members. And then municipal staff, actually many of the folks you were just talking about related to the health department are on that committee. So Kim Rash is on the committee, Alexis Johnson and Tamaya, I can never say Tamaya's last name, but Tamaya, who they all work in the Anchorage Health Department. And then we also have staff from here in City Hall. And then we have kind of a group of community members representing different organizations. So like I mentioned, Celeste and Toffee are participating. Also the Alaska Children's Trust and Recover Alaska, who helped really get the tax implemented. And some folks from the Youth Alaska Action Board for Housing and Homelessness. So a great group of folks, and we've met several times, and really that group has kind of outlined and helped to draft a plan. And now where we're at is we're kind of in this little community input phase where we actually have a draft document. Well, I'll tell you how you can access that draft document. It's really kind of in a survey right now, but and we've been going out to community groups and different venues and places to say, hey, give us your input on this plan, essentially. And then we're incorporating that. I mean, the document's kind of moving and shaking and getting added to as we go along. And then ultimately the assembly will review and approve the plan and then use it going forward. And just to give you kind of a framework of what's in the plan, you can go to the next slide. Like any good plan, there's a vision, mission, and values. There's, like I mentioned, these impact goals. So those are kind of the big picture goals around prevention and the community conditions that create kind of all the adverse things that we see, and how do we improve those community conditions. And then we have what we're calling accountability goals. And those are really more around how the funds get distributed, and where they, kind of the process through which they get distributed. The next slide is just to flash you this is what is in the draft plan right now. So it's very, you can see pretty big picture, but safety and well-being for all in Anchorage. And then the mission is that investments from the voter-approved alcohol tax will make measurable improvements in preventing and addressing the related issues of, and it's those 3 buckets that we just spoke about that are in code that, it needs to address. And then we worked together with the committee to come up with some value statements for the plan. So that's the next slide. And I won't read all of these, but I guess just to say that I'm going to get to a slide that links you to a survey, and essentially all of this is in the survey where you can almost kind of read through the plan and give your responses through the survey. So it asks, do these values reflect the Anchorage that you'd like to see? And you can respond and kind of offer up some ideas as well. And then the next slide is, these are the broad impact goals. So like I said, there's the impact goals and then the accountability goals. And these are really those ones that kind of address the community conditions that we're trying to improve. And so we have a goal around community connections, economic stability, education, healthcare and supports, and housing. And really the way the plan is set up now is it kind of cross-references, a strategy related to community, the broad community connections goal, and shows how that strategy might address one of the 3 buckets. So like this strategy under, creating community connections links to improving public safety or, preventing domestic violence or sexual assault. So it's a little like cerebral and you kind of got to like make a matrix in your mind, but when you read it, you'll understand. It's also a hard thing to present about in a meeting like this. So, and then the next slide is kind of the big overview accountability goals. So of course, wanting to make the process to allocate funds accessible, efficient, effective, and just to make sure that the public knows what's going on because it's money that they are contributing through a tax. And then the next one is my last slide. And this essentially is the QR code where you can get to the survey. And there's also a link to the survey down below. But essentially, it kind of walks you through the details of the plan and then gives you an opportunity to kind of click and indicate which strategies within those big goals that I showed you that you kind of, connect with the most. You can click all of them if you want to, and also just provide some input as well. But I think we wanted to also just give opportunity for people to ask questions. We could even pull up that survey and kind of walk you through it if that would be helpful so you could see. I'm looking at Jasmine, our tech savvy goddess over there, wondering if that's possible, but yes. And I'll just stop and see if anyone has questions or thoughts or anything. Yes.
Lori.
So, who administers the funding? The health department?
The health department and Like children's trust.
What the assent, well, we've heard a lot about how challenging the grant program from this has been. And I will say that the grants are only a small part of it. So essentially the assembly kind of through our legislative process designates where a lot of the fund goes. And Felix, you should jump in and kind of correct me if I'm inaccurate there. But so a lot of it is just like, okay, we're going to use some of the alcohol tax funds to, work on this shelter issue or something. And it was only kind of a small amount that went to those community grants that were then administered through the health department, which I will say, a big aspect of all the community outreach that we've engaged in has talked about what a challenging process that is and how it needs to be improved. And actually, since I'm at the equity committee, a suggestion at one of the meetings I was at was, could the equity committee be the grant review committee? Not that you guys want to get into that, but it was just an interesting idea.
Well, and even if, let's say, something like that were to happen, there are so many municipal requirements that the assembly and the administration would have to decide that they are willing to trust within communities.
Yeah.
And we can't make them do that. I mean, we could recommend it, but just any way you engage with anything, a small grant with the muni, it doesn't have to be the health department, any department, their insurance requirements, they're all the requirements you have to engage, really put a damper on making the process accessible and really interfere with one of the main goals, which is allowing people to build community within community, because it's just the same people will get the funds over and over.
Yeah, it's not about innovation or bringing new partners to the table, or that's what it feels like it's not.
Or
Yeah.
being inclusive.
Yeah.
And distributing funds in an equitable way so communities can decide what they want for themselves.
Yeah, that many of your fellow community members that we've spoken to shared very similar concerns. And we have been talking too about, there are some grant funds through the city that are actually given out pretty easily, as far as I understand, like the mayor's grants and some arts grants. And anyways,
The
and
mayor's grant still requires
Is
you
it?
turn in
Okay.
a lot of you have to turn in insurance, and you have to, I've been negotiating with funders. We're a 50-year-old nonprofit who's really well established, and we're not able to meet insurance requirements. And I'm going into negotiations with funders now. They want $1 million for cyber protection liability. They want $1 million to protect against molestation. They want $1 million to protect against slip and fall. Like, I spoke with Keys to Life, and it's just Shirley May. And she's paying more than $7,000 just to maintain insurance policies to be eligible for these kinds of grants. And so that right there eliminates. And lots of nonprofits ask, or ones trying to get started, ask nonprofits they're connected to host them. And then the admin burden on us in order to then have the money run through us to share all of our insurance and everything else, because we want to support the community. And so I think there has to be a real revamping there. And I know I talk a lot, but Issa's got her hand up.
All right, Miss Issa.
I could listen to Lori talk all day, so go ahead, Lori. But I would say it sounds like you have a really good group of people, but I'm interested in the process. Have you looked back at the way money had been given and done any like case studies on think really met those goals or really worked well? I'm thinking a lot about, like, there is a program that was funded called Fresh Bucks, and I think Lori might know about it, but it gave funding to us to be able, well, the health department did it, but they ended up coming to like Grow North Farm or Refugee Farmers Farm, giving out $50 in fresh produce to anybody who was on WIC and SNAP and an Anchorage resident. And it was wildly successful in the sense that it reached so many Mountain View residents who were able to just go in their neighborhood and get fresh produce all year and all summer, and also have that money stay in Anchorage in the hands of, marginalized communities also earning income. Did you do any sort of that work to like dig into them, see which ones really worked, and then find out like the process of that? I'm just interested because that's like one of many, and I happen to know about it because it like was relevant to the populations I serve.
That's super awesome. It's like great to hear about that. And I think that's just the type of thing that
should continue to get funded. We haven't necessarily done a lot of kind of looking back and analyzing what has been funded. But I think that that could be useful, and that could actually maybe be kind of a strategy of the plan, is just like, look at what's been successful and continue to fund things that have been successful. But when I say that, I think we also probably should have some metrics of what success is. And that's another kind of goal or something that we would have in the plan, is what are our measures? Like, what are we actually trying to achieve with some of these goals and strategies? I don't know if that answers it. I feel like that was a lot of like planner speak.
Maybe I just add to that, so that is really what we're depending on our steering committee to do and our community engagement. So that's exactly the type of thing that we want to hear from you, like right now. And as we go and do all these other engagements, is just, what do you see working? What do you want to put in this plan? So that's a great suggestion.
Okay, looking back, it's always good to go forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing, just to piggyback off what Lori said. Another major problem is the reimbursable. You have to pay upfront out of your budget, and then you get reimbursed from the municipality, and that's problematic.
Yeah, if you don't have budget. Yeah.
Yeah. Just also so you all know, and it makes me think of what you were talking about just before I was speaking, the kind of work you want to do with the health department broadly around equity. But we are meeting, kind of doing like a focus group with really the implementers, right? The people who are making those regulations and getting the money out, to hear from them how that works and try to think about how to do it better, and also share a lot of what we've been hearing, and just think creatively about how this plan could maybe open opportunities to make it less cumbersome. And, what would it be like if we set aside a pot of money where we just trusted organizations, like you said, and just kind of gave money for exciting innovation and inclusive organizations, and just said, okay, we're willing to just give out some of this money really with no strings attached, and see how it goes, and and believe that it will be awesome. So anyhow, we're having that conversation. Kind of how we've been doing our outreach is we're both going to bigger events, or having tables and kind of having people put dots on posters and have a more interactive type of thing. But then we've also been setting up some smaller meetings with key groups. So the implementers of the plan is one of them, like an internal little focus group with municipal staff. So that's happening, I want to say, on the 10th, I think. And then we're also setting up conversations like that, like one with the alcohol industry, to hear how it's been going, just like the actual collection of the taxes and kind of how that's all shaking out. And then talking with tribal interests and tribal entities in our community, just to ensure that their voices are a part of this. I'm trying to think of other groups. Anyways. Oh yeah, behavioral health and crisis providers as well. We'll have a small work session with them, because a lot of the funds are meant to that. Oh, and then also going to the Alaska Alliance for Violence Prevention. So that's kind of a consortium of all of the domestic violence, sexual assault, victim services organizations as well.
So, a couple questions. I don't see any other hands. So Agnew Beck, in conjunction with the steering committee, has been charged by the administration and assembly to give leadership to this strategic plan and come up with a plan and our solution. Agnew Beck, in conjunction with the steering committee, the 3 assembly members, municipal staff, administration, community members, Alaska Children's Trust, Alaska Youth, and et cetera. Okay. And my second question would be, when does the plan need to be implemented?
We don't have like a super strict timeline per se. We have a contract with the city that we actually just extended, and it goes actually through this calendar year. That's not to say this should take that long. Our goal is to kind of wrap up some of this outreach and engagement that we're doing like in the month of April. So we've been kind of doing it February, March, April, and kind of button up a draft of the plan that could go ahead of and be approved by the assembly. And of course, there's a whole process when that something gets approved by the assembly too, where people can, of course, read and advise and also review the plan in that way. So no hard date, but I want to say kind of May, June is maybe when it might be reviewed and approved by the assembly potentially. And then there's also a phase of our work that's then to kind of communicate out about the plan and the alcohol tax generally, you know, to kind of inform community members like, hey, now there's this plan and there's also still all the alcohol tax funds and it's doing, you know, these important things in our community and, you know, stay involved and pay attention kind of thing. Anyways. Does that answer your
Okay,
question?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You got me. You got me. You got me. Any other questions, commentary for?
Was Jasmine able to pull up the survey?
I think so.
Let me just take a quick look at that so people know what it looks like.
Yeah. So here's the survey. That's maybe just the landing page. It's like, thanks for doing this with us. Oh yeah, this is just you. I mean, you really do. You kind of read the plan. You're like, okay, here's the vision and the mission. What do I think? And it gives you space to just say, yeah, these are great, or you have a typo, or I think you should add these 5 ideas. So we're using that input. And then it goes kind of impact area by impact area, so to speak. So for instance, you'll recall we have those big broad goals around like housing, community connection. So this one is housing, and it gives you the strategies underneath housing that we are currently have kind of included in the plan. And you can click on as many as you like, as little as you like, or you can say, I don't like any of these. And it essentially goes kind of like topic area by topic area. So this is housing, economic stability, and you'll note that there's not always a big goal for, I mean, a lot of strategies for each area. Education related ones. And this is healthcare and supports. We have a lot there because there's a lot around kind of the behavioral health and substance misuse strategies. And then community connections.
Yep, there's a strategy around, it's not specific to community health workers, but it is specific to mobile health interventions. And then there's another one related to integrated, basically integrating health, primary care and behavioral health into community settings like schools, libraries. But we could make it more specific. That's good. That's exactly the type of info we're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah. Line up. And just a little
Well, I
back.
love the way you guys threw out all of these acronyms.
APCA, the Alaska Primary Care Association, right? Yeah. Also, just so you know, the strategies are in here. We're not like, oh, let's just think of some random strategies. We consulted all these kind of existing goals and plans that are in the state. So like we looked at Healthy Alaskans 2030, we looked at, you know, kind of like domestic violence prevention plans. We looked at kind of all of the existing body of work that is out there that other organizations in our state have worked on, and or kind of national organizations kind of put out as like the things you do to prevent these types of things. So it's grounded in that. The survey itself doesn't have, like, the plan has all the kind of footnotes and all the things. The survey is really just a tool to get input on the plan, but really the words that are in the survey are also in the plan as it stands right now. But again, like Thea said, I keep making it sound like the plan is drafted. I mean, precisely now is the time to say things like, you got to have something about community health workers, or, you know, I don't see enough about reentry services or, really anything. I mean, some of the things we have heard, just so you all know, for people who've responded to the survey, some ideas that we've had, like one person did say, you should have something in there about like just preventative health services for all people, just like broadly. We've also heard that there's maybe not enough for victims, and kind of focused on the victims of crimes and of sexual assault and domestic violence, and that seems like there's more for perpetrators in a way. That was like one person's perspective. I mean, so we're hearing all sorts of interesting feedback. Yeah. And then we also have been kind of tallying the number of clicks or votes for each of the different strategies. And also when we go to community meetings, the posters that we have are the exact same as what's in that survey. So people have been putting, like dots next to the ideas they like on the posters. So we have this kind of spreadsheet that tallies how many dots each things have gotten and how many kind of clicks on the survey. And I will say the two strategies that kind of have jumped to the top that everyone is like, yes, that have gotten the most votes, so to speak, there's a strategy around working with large employers to encourage living wage, and in particular for female head of households. And that has gotten like off the charts votes. And then also strategies around increasing the number of affordable housing units and affordable rental units have gotten really high votes. So there's a lot of interest in the people that we have reviewed this in those two ideas.
But when you mention like preventative health, the maintenance deals, would that be for like uninsured or underinsured persons or whatever funding available for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing is, Thea and I keep saying, we're like, at some point, is somebody going to say, why is this plan not organized around those three buckets? Like, why have you made this very like obvious, like, these are the 10 things we're going to do related to, sexual assault, domestic violence, and prevention. And these are the 10 things we're going to do. And instead, we've kind of made it more looking at this like deep community conditions kind of, and we are making the link, but everyone we've talked with is like, gets it. They're like, yes, these are the things that we need to do to build like a strong and healthy community so that we don't have these problems in the future. So that's been kind of this neat, exciting, like bright spot in going around and talking to folks about what's in there right now.
Okay, and so my assumption would be with Madam Thea and yourself, Agnew Beck, and the steering committee, certainly with Madam Celeste and Taffy as part of that steering committee, then my hope would be that throughout this process, we have enough persons on there to see to keeping it equitable.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I encourage you all to really take that survey, look at it, like read all the things in there, add comments, and also share it with anybody you know. I mean, we've mostly just been promoting it at events we've gone to like this. So we haven't done some sort of big wholesale, like sending out big email blasts or anything. It's just kind of been like, hey, take this survey. So yeah.
And Jazz, would it be possible for us non-technical folk for you to just send the link out to all of us? Thank you so much.
Can I just one more thing? So we had that presentation a few months ago from Zenobia, from the Safe States report. And I think if you look back at the handout that she gave us, that, where she gave us recommendations around how to address these issues, you'll see a lot of that in this plan. So if you remember, we had that really interesting conversation with her about how to address structural racism directly or through either focusing on local economic issues. Her top one was reframe the conversation so that it speaks to a broad audience, use an asset-based approach, address mental health and shared risk and protective factors. So those are that's what you'll see in here.
So direct.
Yeah, right. So like what Tanya was referring to, where we say those top two that people have really supported so far, and it's kind of by a giant margin. Like those are like 20, 16 people. The other ones are like 5 people. Those are ones where we talk about, for example, working with large employers in sectors where there's a high participation of women. Because when you look at our poverty statistics, I mean, this one really stands out to me. If you're a female head of household with children under 5 in Anchorage, 40% of those households are living in poverty, right? And then when you look at our poverty statistics, you're so much more likely to be living in poverty if you're not a white household. So again, it's kind of using that way that Zenobia talked about it to get to the same place, but using language and data that is broader than going straight at the race-based disparities. So I just want you to have that in mind when you look at it. And great to get your feedback on that as well. Maybe you don't think that's the right approach. So
I just have a question. And so instead of just going to the race base, because we know that that might not be a way to get to the larger audience, because they might shut down because they're not wanting to hear that topic of discussion. So you go around in a roundabout way to get to the goal.
well, I think what's really interesting, I mean, this is a huge topic we could spend forever talking about, and we should, because it's really important. When you look at like the research that has been done in Alaska on child abuse and child maltreatment, for example, there's been some really good epidemiology analysis that the state of Alaska, Jared Parrish, has done. And what he showed is that the 3 biggest risk factors for having your child involved with OCS is being on Medicaid, the mom not completing high school, and the mom being young. And that those 3 risk factors way outweigh the race of the person. But those 3 risk factors occur more commonly among people who happen to also be Alaska Native, happen to also be Black or Pacific Islander. And so basically, I think where what we tried to do is kind of focus on those 3 things. Because what Jared shows is the race part is irrelevant. If you get rid of these 3 things, it doesn't matter what race you are, right? So, and I think that's what Zenobia was telling us too. And so using that research, you can really just focus, but you get to the same people. Do you know what I'm saying?
I definitely get what you're saying. And it's what I was saying too. It's more acceptable when you look at the 3. I mean, I can see that as a way to get to the hearts of people. When you talk about the race, not so much.
But I think there's another part of that, which is the race is not the cause. And sometimes, I think that's part of what Zenobia was telling us. Sometimes when we talk about race, we make it seem like that's the cause. It's not. It's not because there's anything different about Alaska Native families themselves, that they have a higher rate of engagement with child protection. It's these other factors commonly happen to Alaska Native families because of all of the structural reasons, because of all of those things. But I think, I guess, along with the same emphasis on talking about diverse communities in a celebratory, strengths-based way, like, I think we have to be careful to not make that false connection in people's minds that there's something causative about, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
We could go on and on and on.
Yeah,
I get you,
yeah.
but I also,
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift relative to processes, if I can use that as plural for processes. And the bottom line is, with the paradigm shift, there are those of us who have to make the shift and retrain and reprogram and all of that kind of thing to get to the nugget of gold that is the end result, when we more preferably would like to start at the starting point. You know what I'm saying? Not only get to the end result, but have an acknowledgement of what transpires relative to race.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, we want you to be aware of that. You know, and so it's a paradigm shift. It's another way of thinking to get to that nugget of gold. At the same time, though, we would like folk to acknowledge that this is that.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, yeah.
And I seem to have success engaging in conversations when I'm saying people are working full time. They are for a company that is making record-breaking profits, and they are on Medicaid. They are on SNAP. They are not allowed dignity. They are working full time. They are coming in the evening to classes to try to improve their language to move up. But there is absolutely no excuse that we've structured a society in which people are working full time and are not allowed dignity. But also that our tax dollars that we're paying into our government are subsidizing corporations to make large profits because they are not supporting with a livable wage to the point that people can be off public assistance. And that's we can all agree that that shouldn't be happening.
When are you gonna run for office?
What am I a what?
Run for office.
Hell
See, I
no.
wasn't by myself.
But I'm gonna have to leave early and I want to make a shout out and I'm late making it. But we have two members of our committee that were selected for 40 under 40, Taffy and Issa.
Oh my
And
God.
that's amazing and a big shout out to both of you.
You said 40 under 40?
40
Not
and
40 under 40. Two of them are in this room.
so
right
that
now.
means they're under 40 years old and they're having huge impact in the state of Alaska.
Okay.
So yeah, big shout out to our friends.
Oh, thank you for that.
Congratulations.
Yes, that's
Thank you,
great.
thank you.
And we understand you have to leave, so yeah, we're good with that. Yeah, okay. Further questions, commentary for gracious Tanya?
Toffee asked if Thea could share the research she was talking about.
Yes.
What was it?
The research that I was talking about, I'll send that to Jasmine.
Okay. Any other questions, commentary?
Maybe a quick question. When is the celebration of top 40 under 40? And is this committee planning to attend?
It's really expensive. It's like $180 per ticket. It's like, I'm on the fence. I was thinking of actually just crashing. Because, yeah, it's just outside my budget.
Oh, so when is it?
I can look it up, I'll send you Jasmine.
I just looked it up. It's April 26th.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other questions or commentary for Tanya? All right, here now, thank you so much. Much
Thank you.
appreciative for giving us that insight on the alcohol tax plan and
Yeah.
all of what the strategic plan might entail. Good to know. Yeah. All righty then. Thank you so much. All right, then we'll move to committee updates. Anybody have any updates? We've had the 40 over 40, under 40, whatever. We go ahead. Yeah. Any other updates?
Just that the Alaska Black Caucus has a lot of programming going on, and we're looking forward to sharing more with the community. Just too many to discuss in detail right now, but just be on the lookout. Thanks.
And I want to thank our gracious co-host for in the land acknowledgement, making a slight reference to Easter and what it means and all of that. Well, the Interdenominational Ministry Alliance of Anchorage and vicinity has a Good Friday, 7 Last Word service on tomorrow night at New Season Church out on International. I think it's 639 International. And so everybody's welcome. Yeah, 7 p.m. Yes.
On Saturday at 1 p.m., First Presbyterian Church is going to be doing I'm not exactly sure if it's a service or if it's just a gathering, but it's to acknowledge and remember the over 50 people who died on the streets in Anchorage in 2023. So it's like basically one a week died unsheltered in our community. So 1 p.m. on Saturday, they'll be at First Presbyterian Church, which is right here on the Park Strip, a gathering to remember those neighbors.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Yes, Lord.
I forgot to give a shout out to Anna Brawley, who was also selected as one of the 40 under 40 who has attended these meetings and is on our assembly. Yep, thank you.
All righty, thank you. Anyone else?
And I forgot to mention Souls to the Polls,
Yeah,
Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, in partnership with ABC, is going to be hosting that this Saturday because we want to encourage everybody to get to the polls or turn in your ballot in the mail.
yeah, and I think that's what, 2:00? Yeah, okay, on Saturday. All right. Any other updates? Not hearing any, then we'll entertain assembly updates. Mr. Felix, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, seeing as we're so close to the end of time, I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have any pressing questions on things that you've seen in the media.
I have a couple. First, how can you just give a brief update on the houselessness situation? And then what is going on with APD and officers getting,
Body cameras.
in all of this mess? And there's different messes.
So I'm happy to answer your first question. I'm going to need you to be a little bit more specific on your second question. But on your first question, so with regard to our work on housing and homelessness, brief synopsis is we are looking at extending our emergency cold weather shelter system season by a month approximately to the end of May, so May 31st. After that, we're looking at all the other things that we can do to help successfully transition people from shelter to some other status that is not unsheltered. And we have a lot of different requests, asks, ideas that are on the table for that. The Next Step pilot program is continuing to be successful. So far, they have housed, I think it was 80. So far, they've housed 80 individuals out of the 150 that they're looking to house by the end of May. And then there's a second part of the phase of the pilot that they're looking at for the summer of housing an additional 150 individuals. So long story short, there's a lot of different moving pieces, and we're trying to do our best to make this transition out of winter shelter as successful as possible for everyone involved. On your other question, if you have some more details, that would be helpful. But otherwise, the assembly really hasn't dug into any particular issues that has been in the media in the last month or so. Perhaps it'll come up at next week's Public Safety Committee meeting. I am not certain.
Okay, I'm just talking about internal affairs doing these investigations of their own police officers and trying to sweep things under the rug, and then the media gets hold of it, and then that's the only way there's consequences. So, thanks.
Okay, well, then I might ask you, what are the internal affairs investigating?
Well, for one, there was the issue with the police officer that was intoxicated.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, what you say? Okay.
I asked for an update on what was happening with the 2022 audit and the impact that's going to have on funding for the Muni?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So it's a little bit unknown right now. It's TBD. We are working to ask for extensions of deadlines by the state, and the hope is that we will get those extensions, and then we'll be able to successfully submit the act for probably the latest update I got is they're like 2 weeks away from um, getting everything in order, tying everything out, and being able to finally submit the ACFR and all of its various components. And for folks who aren't familiar with the acronym, it's the Annual Comprehensive Financial Review, which is our annual audit. So we're very close to the finish line. We just need the state to give us one more allowance, and it sounds like they're willing to give us an allowance. And then once everything's turned in, there shouldn't be any more concerns about us possibly not receiving any state or federal funds or the shelf insurance question. All of those things should be resolved once we get this in.
Right. Thank you, Felix, and thank you, Lori. I responded to you late this evening, but my intent was that you would ask that question, and you did. All righty. Okay. Anything briefly that you wanted to update us on, Felix, beyond the questions raised?
Yeah, other than that, I think as folks probably know, we're going to be approaching budget season very shortly. I suspect it'll be perhaps next week. Yeah, perhaps next Friday or the week after that, where we will get the administration's proposed first quarter budget revisions. And so, yeah, if this committee wants to be included in that in any way, I think we need to be having some conversations on that.
Okay. Thank you much, and we'll give that consideration. All right, and thank you for all of your input this evening in our meeting as well. Moving up to the wrap-up portion, I don't have any questions to be identified for assembly actions to be completed before next meeting, and maybe are we open to possibly inviting Junior to the meeting, the next meeting? Well, then I can reach out to him, and okay, I can do that. Reach out to him and see if we can get him to meet with us in our next meeting relative to the audit, language access audit. Yes.
And Pastor May, if you could invite him and maybe his staff, because one of the individuals is the one that's responsible for the language piece. Because he might say he's not, I mean.
Yeah, the person that's responsible for the audit or somebody in the language access department. Okay. All righty. We can do that. Any other items to identify before our next meeting?
I'll follow up with Director Rush.
Okay. Health Department. Okay, and so I guess some dates that are feasible for her and for us or whatever. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Anybody else have anything? And hearing none, we're within our time frame. Any audience participation? Don't see any. All righty, or not hearing any, then we'll officially wrap up the meeting. All righty, we're done. Yeah.